Welcome back to our zombie series. In this radio broadcast, you'll hear about the scientist's final warning. But before we dive in, I have a small request. If you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us create more content like this, and it truly means a lot to us. So, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This is Dr. Elise Carter, broadcasting from the remains of Project Genesis. If you're hearing this, it means there's still a chance, however slim it may seem, for humanity to rise from the ashes of this nightmare. But you need to listen closely. There's no time for second chances. The cure exists. I found it. But I am running out of time, and soon they'll be inside. I don't know your name, or even where you're hearing this from, but that doesn't matter. What matters is that you're here, that you're alive, and that you're listening. This isn't just a message of desperation. This is a mission. The infection can be stopped. It can be reversed. But everything we've sacrificed, everything we've worked for, is at risk of being lost forever. I'm trapped, and I can't get the cure out on my own. I need your help. The infected, they're no longer the mindless creatures we thought they were. They're evolving. They're learning. I can hear them now, moving beyond the lower levels. They've breached every line of defense we set up. The pounding against the steel gates gets louder with every passing moment. Time is slipping away, faster than I can comprehend. The cure, it's not just a theory. It's not a hope or a wish. It's real. I've held the key to reversing this in my hands. It's incomplete, yes, but it's close. Closer than anyone dared to dream. But the data, the formula, the prototypes, they're all here in this lab. Without them, it's over. If this lab falls, the cure will fall with it. The last spark of hope we have will be extinguished. Listen carefully. The lab is in Sector 7B, just beyond the quarantine zone. It's a dangerous place, I won't lie. The infected swarm the area and they're drawn to sound. Moving silently will be your best chance. When you get here, head for the secure data chamber. You'll know it by the reinforced doors and the biometric locks. The formula is stored within the mainframe. I've encrypted the access codes into this broadcast. If you can reach it, you can retrieve everything you need. I know what I'm asking of you. I know the risk, but I also know that if you've survived this long, you have the strength and the courage to finish what I started. Humanity is counting on you. You might feel like just one person in a world consumed by darkness, but one person can make all the difference. You can make all the difference. I wish I could tell you more. I wish I could guide you every step of the way, but I can't. I can already hear the metal groaning, the locks starting to give way. They'll be inside any moment now. Once they're in, there's no coming back from this. Please, whoever you are, don't let the cure die here. Don't let everything we've fought for, everything we've lost, be for nothing. You have to be the light in this darkness. You have to carry this burden forward. The coordinates are embedded in this message. Follow them. Find the lab, save the cure, and save us all. If anyone out there is listening, I'm counting on you. My name is Dr. Elise Carter. I was once a scientist with dreams of reshaping the future, of giving humanity a second chance at life. Stronger, healthier, free from disease. I never imagined those dreams would lead us here. To this. To a world consumed by the very creation we thought would save it. If you're listening to this, you deserve to know the truth about how it all began, about how our greatest ambition became our greatest failure. I was recruited into Project Genesis 5 years ago, fresh out of my postdoctoral studies. The project was groundbreaking, funded by governments and private investors who saw it as a solution to the global health crises plaguing our world. Cancer, autoimmune disorders, even aging itself, all of it was in our sights. Our mission was to design a synthetic viral strain that could act as both a cure and a preventative measure, a biological reset button for the human body. We called it the Haven strain. It wasn't just a virus, it was a marvel of bioengineering. The idea was simple in theory, but revolutionary in execution. The strain would integrate itself into human DNA, repairing damaged cells and enhancing immune responses at the molecular level. The initial tests on isolated cell cultures were promising. Disease cells regenerated. Viral infections were neutralized. Even the aging process seemed to slow down in certain specimens. It was everything we had hoped for and more. The first trials on animal models exceeded our expectations. Rats with advanced cancers were completely cured. Elderly primates displayed signs of rejuvenation, sharper reflexes, improved memory, increased vitality. By the time we reached Phase 3 trials, the entire team was buzzing with excitement. We were on the brink of something extraordinary. We believed we were about to change the course of human history. I remember the day we received approval for human trials. It was a moment of triumph, a culmination of years of relentless work. The lab was alive with celebration, laughter echoing through the sterile halls. We toasted to our success, to the lives we would save. Looking back now, I realize how blind we were to the storm that was brewing just beneath the surface. The first human subjects were carefully selected, individuals with terminal illnesses, people who had nothing to lose and everything to gain. The initial results were nothing short of miraculous. Patients who had been confined to hospital beds were walking again. Tumors vanished. Chronic diseases were eradicated. For weeks, we reveled in our success. We believed we had done it. We had conquered the impossible. Then came Subject 13. He was a young man, barely 25, diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of lymphoma. He was one of our star cases. Within days of receiving the Haven strain, his condition began to improve. His energy levels skyrocketed, his appetite returned, and his scans showed no trace of the disease. But then, subtle changes began to emerge. He became irritable, unable to sleep. His appetite grew insatiable, yet no amount of food seemed to satisfy him. We thought it was a side effect, something we could address in the next iteration of the strain. We were wrong. Within a week, Subject 13's condition deteriorated. His body temperature dropped to hypothermic levels and his heart rate slowed unnaturally. His eyes, they changed. The sclera darkened and his pupils expanded until his irises were barely visible. And then, one night, he attacked one of the nurses. It wasn't just an outburst of aggression. It was something primal, feral. It took 6 security personnel to restrain him. At first we thought it was an isolated case, a rare reaction to the strain, but then one by one the other subjects began exhibiting similar symptoms. Irritability turned to violence. Their bodies began to decay even as their strength increased. It was as if the Haven strain was consuming them from the inside out. We shut down the trials immediately, but it was too late. The strain had mutated, and it was spreading faster than we could control. The outbreak started within the facility. Staff members who had come into contact with the infected patients began showing symptoms. The infection spread like wildfire, jumping from person to person with terrifying speed. By the time we realized what was happening, it had already escaped the lab. A single contaminated sample, smuggled out by an infected technician, was all it took. Within weeks, the infection had reached the nearby city. Hospitals were overrun. Emergency services collapsed. People fled in panic, but the infection was relentless. It wasn't just a disease. It was a transformation. The infected weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. They became something else, something monstrous. Driven by an insatiable hunger, they attacked anything and anyone in their path. In the chaos, governments declared martial law. Quarantine zones were established, but they failed to contain the spread. Cities fell like dominoes. Communication networks went dark. The world as we knew it crumbled into chaos. In those early days, my team and I clung to hope. We locked ourselves inside the lab, determined to find a solution. We worked around the clock, dissecting every strand of the mutated strain, searching for a weakness. For a time, we thought we'd found one. A protein anomaly in the infected suggested the possibility of neutralization. It was a small glimmer of hope, but it was enough to keep us going. But progress came at a cost. Equipment failures slowed us down. Supplies dwindled. And then the infected reached the lab. They were relentless, pounding against the reinforced doors day and night. One by one, my team began to fall. Some were taken by the infection, others by despair. By the time the last of them was gone, I was the only one left. Even before the team collapsed, fractures had begun to form. Arguments broke out over priorities. Should we try to complete the cure, or focus on protecting what we had left? Some thought we should broadcast our findings to the world, but others feared it would only lead to more chaos if the data fell into the wrong hands. That division cost us precious time and lives. Every disagreement felt like a dagger in my chest, a reminder of how we had gone from a united front to a broken group of survivors. The infected, they're not like anything we've ever seen. They're not mindless. They're adapting, learning. They've found ways to get past our defenses. They hunt with terrifying precision, as though some remnant of their humanity drives them. And the longer they remain infected, the more aggressive they become. If we had understood that sooner, maybe we could have prepared better. Maybe we could have stopped them before it was too late. Now, as I sit here, recording this message, I am surrounded by reminders of what we've lost. The faces of my colleagues haunt me. Their laughter, their determination, their belief that we could save the world. And yet, amidst the despair, I know there's still a chance. The cure is here, incomplete but real. It could be the key to turning this nightmare around. If someone, if you, can finish what I started. The Haven strain was our greatest mistake, but it doesn't have to be the end. Humanity's survival now rests in your hands. Hope. In the middle of a world unraveling, hope was all we had left. But it wasn't the blind, naive kind of hope that comforted you in dark times. It was the kind born of desperation, clawing its way out of despair. And in the depths of our desperation, we found it. The cure. The one thing that could undo this nightmare. It wasn't a miraculous moment of realization, but rather the result of countless grueling hours, failed experiments, and fragile breakthroughs. For months, the lab had been our haven and our prison. We were surrounded by the infected, their growls echoing through the steel barriers that barely held them back. Every breach, every attack reminded us of how close we were to losing everything. Yet, despite the chaos outside and the fear inside, we pushed forward. The breakthrough began with an anomaly. It was subtle, almost too easy to overlook amidst the flood of data we were processing every day. We had been analyzing the infected tissue samples for weeks, searching for any weakness in the Haven strain. Most of what we found only deepened our despair. The virus was incredibly adaptive, resilient beyond anything we had anticipated. But then, hidden in a corner of one of the data sets, there it was, a protein anomaly. At first, we thought it was another dead end, a minor irregularity that meant nothing in the grand scheme of things. But something about it felt different. The anomaly disrupted the virus's replication cycle, creating instability in its structure. It was the first real weakness we had found. I remember staring at the screen, my heart pounding as the implications began to sink in. Could this be it? The key we'd been searching for? We repeated the tests over and over, each time holding our breath, waiting for the results. And each time, the anomaly persisted. The virus, which had seemed unstoppable, began to falter. It wasn't much, just a small crack in its defenses, but it was enough. We had found a way to fight back. The moment we confirmed our findings, the atmosphere in the lab shifted. For the first time in months, there was a spark of hope. It wasn't celebration. We were too exhausted, too aware of the challenges ahead. but it was enough to keep us going. We threw ourselves into the work, determined to turn this discovery into something tangible. The cure wasn't just an idea anymore, it was within reach. The protein anomaly could be targeted, neutralized, and potentially reversed. We began developing a serum, a prototype that could disrupt the virus's replication and halt the infection. The process was painstakingly slow. Every step required precision, and our resources were stretched thin. The equipment we relied on was old, overworked, and prone to failure. Power outages became a constant obstacle, forcing us to recalibrate machines and redo experiments we couldn't afford to lose. The serum itself presented its own challenges. The protein we needed to target the anomaly was incredibly unstable. Synthesizing it required a specific compound derived from a rare mineral. We had only a small supply, and finding more was impossible without leaving the safety of the lab. Every dose we produced felt like a small miracle, but it was never enough. Our first successful batch of serum was a turning point. Testing it on isolated infected cells showed remarkable results. The virus's replication halted, and the infected cells began to break down. It was the proof we needed that the cure wasn't just a theory, it was real. But reality has a way of tempering even the greatest victories. While the serum worked in controlled environments, administering it to a live subject was a different matter entirely. The infected's bodies had been ravaged by the virus, their cellular structures fundamentally altered. Reversing the infection without causing further damage was a delicate process. We had to fine-tune the serum, balancing its potency with its stability. Every failure was a reminder of how much was at stake. Our first live test was on a team member who had been bitten during a supply run. Administering the serum felt like a leap of faith, a fragile hope that bordered on desperation. For hours we watched, waiting for any sign of change. At first, nothing happened, but then, slowly, the symptoms began to recede. Her fever broke. The discoloration in her skin faded. Her breathing stabilized. It was a moment of profound relief, proof that we could save lives. But our relief was short-lived. Within 24 hours, the infection returned. The serum had bought her time, but it wasn't enough. The virus was too resilient, its hold on the body too strong to be fully eradicated. We had made progress, but it was clear that we still had a long way to go. The challenges we faced weren't just technical. The psychological toll of our work weighed heavily on all of us. Every failure felt personal, a reminder of the lives we couldn't save. Tensions ran high, arguments breaking out over priorities and resources. Should we focus on producing more serum or finding a way to stabilize it for mass production? Should we risk leaving the lab to search for more supplies, knowing the dangers that awaited us outside? Amidst the growing pressure, the threat of the infected loomed larger than ever. Their attacks on the lab became more frequent, more coordinated. It was as if they knew what we were doing, as if some remnant of their humanity drove them to stop us. Every breach was a reminder of how fragile our defenses were, how close we were to losing everything. Despite everything, we kept going. The cure wasn't just a goal, it was our only chance at redemption. We knew the odds were against us, but the alternative was unthinkable. Every vial of serum we produced, every test we conducted, brought us one step closer to turning the tide. There was one moment that stands out above all others, a moment that encapsulated both the hope and the despair of our work. We had just completed another batch of serum, the largest we had managed to produce so far. It was enough for 10 doses, 10 lives that could be saved. But as we celebrated this small victory, the alarm sounded. The infected had breached the outer perimeter. They were inside. The lab descended into chaos. We scrambled to secure the serum, knowing that losing it would mean losing everything. The infected were relentless, their growls echoing through the halls as they closed in. We fought to hold them back, barricading doors and retreating deeper into the lab. In the chaos, one of the vials was shattered. It felt like a punch to the gut. Months of work, gone in an instant. By the time the attack was over, we were left with 9 vials and a lab in ruins. But we were alive, and so was the cure. It was a bitter reminder of how fragile our progress was, how easily it could all be lost. As I sit here now, recording this message, I can still feel the weight of those moments. The discovery of the cure was a turning point, but it was only the beginning. The challenges we faced, the limited resources, the technical hurdles, the constant threat of the infected, were immense. Yet, amidst it all, we found hope. The cure exists. It's not perfect, but it's real. And with it, there's a chance to undo this nightmare. The Haven strain took so much from us. It turned our greatest ambition into our greatest failure. But it doesn't have to end here. If you're listening to this, you have the power to finish what we started. The cure is more than just a scientific breakthrough. It's a symbol of everything we've fought for, everything we've lost. Don't let it be in vain. It began slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Small changes in the infected's behavior, an increase in their coordination, the way they moved, no longer erratic and random, but focused, purposeful. We told ourselves it was coincidence, that there was no way the Haven strain could evolve like this. But deep down, we knew the truth. The infection was changing, and so were the infected. The lab had always been our sanctuary, a place of safety amid the chaos. But as the weeks dragged on, it began to feel less like a fortress, and more like a cage. The infected were always there, surrounding us, relentless in their attempts to breach the barriers. Every attack brought them closer. Every failure chipped away at our morale. And yet, we carried on, driven by the hope that the cure was within reach. But hope can only sustain you for so long. It started with minor equipment malfunctions. The generator would sputter, struggling to keep the lab running. Lights flickered at inopportune moments, plunging us into darkness that seemed to stretch on forever. Computers crashed mid-experiment, erasing hours of critical work. At first, we chalked it up to wear and tear, months of overuse in conditions the equipment wasn't designed for. But then the malfunctions became more targeted. Security systems would deactivate without explanation. Doors that were supposed to be locked swung open on their own. And then there was the sabotage. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A misplaced tool, a supply cabinet left open. But as the incidents piled up, it became clear that something, or someone, was working against us. Security footage revealed shadows moving through the corridors at night, shapes too human to be infected. The thought of a traitor among us was horrifying. But so was the alternative, that the infected had somehow retained enough of their humanity to manipulate us from within. The tension in the lab was palpable. Suspicion turned us against each other, breaking the fragile unity that had kept us alive this long. Heated arguments erupted over the smallest things. Who left the gate unlocked? Who forgot to check the perimeter? Trust eroded like sand in a storm, leaving behind a team fractured and desperate. The infected's first successful breach was a wake-up call. It happened in the middle of the night, the kind of night where silence feels heavy, oppressive. I was in the data chamber, running simulations on the latest serum prototypes. The hum of the machines was almost soothing, a rare moment of calm in the chaos. And then the alarms went off. At first, I thought it was another false alarm. They'd become almost routine by that point. Security sensors misfiring, glitches in the system. But when I glanced at the monitor, my blood ran cold. The outer gate had been compromised. Dozens of infected swarmed the courtyard, their movements swift and coordinated. They weren't just attacking randomly. They were targeting the weak points in the gate, the places where the steel was thinnest. I bolted for the control room, my heart pounding as I called for backup. The team scrambled to activate the secondary barriers, sealing off the inner lab. It bought us time, but not much. The infected pounded against the reinforced doors, their growls reverberating through the halls. Every impact sent a shiver down my spine, a reminder of how close they were. We managed to hold them back, but not without casualties. 2 of our team were lost that night, dragged screaming into the swarm. Their faces haunted me for days, a grim reminder of how thin the line between survival and death had become. In the days following the breach, the sabotage became impossible to ignore. Supplies vanished from locked storage rooms. Key components of the generator were damaged, leaving us reliant on the backup system. Even the serum prototypes weren't safe. Several vials were found shattered on the floor of the lab. The realization that someone among us could be working against us was almost as terrifying as the infected themselves. We began monitoring each other, watching for signs of betrayal, but the stress only made things worse. Paranoia crept into every interaction, every glance. The team grew quieter, more isolated. The camaraderie that had once bound us together was gone, replaced by a fragile truce built on mutual distrust. And then, during a routine security check, we found the evidence we'd been dreading. One of the infected had made it inside the lab, hidden among the survivors. They weren't like the others. There were no outward signs of infection, no decayed flesh, or unnatural movements. But the blood test didn't lie. The Haven strain was inside them, dormant but active. It was a chilling reminder of how insidious the virus had become. The infected sleeper had been sabotaging us from within, their actions guided by some lingering remnant of humanity, or perhaps by the virus itself. We never found out for sure. They were executed before we could run further tests, their body incinerated to prevent further contamination. But the damage was already done. The night the lab fell will be etched into my memory forever. It began with a sound, a low, rumbling vibration that seemed to come from the very walls themselves. I was in the main chamber, overseeing the final stages of serum production. The lights flickered overhead, casting eerie shadows across the room. The air felt heavy, charged with a tension that made it hard to breathe. And then the alarms went off. The infected had breached the lower levels, swarming through the corridors with terrifying speed. The security cameras showed them moving as a single unit, their actions unnervingly precise. They bypassed the outer defenses as if they'd known exactly where to strike. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. We fought to hold them back, sealing off corridor after corridor as they advanced. The air was thick with the smell of burning circuitry and the acrid tang of blood. The infected didn't stop, didn't hesitate. They threw themselves against the barriers with a ferocity that defied reason, their growls echoing through the lab. The power failed halfway through the evacuation, plunging the lab into darkness. Emergency lights flickered on, casting everything in an eerie red glow. It felt like we were trapped in a nightmare, the walls closing in around us as the infected advanced. Amid the chaos, I found myself in the data chamber, clutching the last remaining vials of serum. My hands trembled as I secured them in a reinforced case, knowing that this was all that remained of our work. The formula, the research, the hope of humanity. It was all in that case. Losing it wasn't an option. The infected were everywhere. Their growls grew louder, more insistent as they pounded against the door. The steel buckled under their weight, and I knew I didn't have much time. My mind raced, a whirlwind of fear and determination. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I couldn't leave without the serum. When the door finally gave way, I was already running. The infected flooded the chamber, their movements erratic yet purposeful. I didn't look back. There was no point. My only goal was to get the serum to safety. As I ran through the crumbling lab, dodging the infected and navigating the maze of destruction, I couldn't shake the weight of my responsibility. Every failure, every loss, it all led back to us, to the choices we had made. We had created the Haven strain. We had unleashed this nightmare, and now we were paying the price. But even amidst the guilt and despair, there was a spark of hope. The serum wasn't perfect, but it was real. It represented a chance to undo the damage we had done, to give humanity a fighting chance. I had to believe that it would be enough. By the time I reached the escape pod, the lab was in ruins. Fires raged unchecked, casting flickering shadows across the walls. The infected swarmed through the facility, tearing apart everything in their path. The screams of my colleagues echoed through the halls, each one a dagger to the heart. I sealed the pod's hatch and activated the launch sequence, my hands shaking as I entered the coordinates. As the pod shot away from the lab, I allowed myself a brief moment of relief. The serum was safe. Humanity still had a chance, but as I looked back at the burning ruins of the lab, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had lost more than we had saved. The lab had been our home, our sanctuary. Now, it was gone, consumed by the chaos we had created. As I record this message, the memories of that night are still fresh. The fear, the desperation, the overwhelming sense of loss. It's all there, lingering like a shadow. The lab's collapse was a turning point, a reminder of how fragile our hope truly is. But even in the face of such devastation, I refuse to give up. The serum exists. It's not perfect, but it's a start. If you're listening to this, know that you have the power to finish what we started. The fight isn't over. Humanity's survival depends on you. The ticking clock wasn't just metaphorical anymore. Every second brought us closer to the end. The containment systems were failing, and the infected were closing in. Each day was shorter than the one before, not because of time, but because of how little control we had left. There were moments when the weight of it all made us hesitate. A split second too long staring at a monitor, a glance at the dwindling supplies. But hesitation was a luxury we couldn't afford. This was survival. This was a fight against inevitability. And deep down, I knew we were losing. The first sign of imminent collapse was in the infrastructure. The lab's systems, designed to endure but never meant to outlast an apocalypse, began to crumble under constant strain. The primary generator, our lifeline to the outside world, was the first to go. A cascade of failures followed. Communication systems sputtered and died. Air filtration systems clogged beyond repair, and containment doors began to malfunction. We had known this day would come. Weeks earlier, I had sketched out worst-case scenarios with my team. We need redundancies, I had insisted. But the resources simply weren't there. Supplies dwindled with every failed scavenging run. Every malfunction became a test of ingenuity, a test we failed more often than not. By now, even the emergency lights flickered uncertainly, casting the lab in a haunted glow. Shadows played tricks on my mind, each one looking like a figure stalking me from the corner of my vision. My hands trembled as I worked, soldering yet another connection in a desperate attempt to keep the backup generator online. It felt like patching a sinking ship with chewing gum. Every sound felt magnified. The faint whine of a fan blade struggling to spin, the echo of footsteps down an empty corridor, the ever-present growls and scratching of the infected just outside. The lab, which had once been a place of purpose and discovery, now felt like a tomb, waiting to be sealed. The infected were evolving. That much was clear. We had seen it in their behavior, how they targeted weak points in the lab's defenses, how they adapted their attacks. What we didn't understand was how. The infected weren't mindless anymore, if they ever had been. They moved with terrifying coordination, almost as though they were being guided by some collective instinct. The thought that the Haven strain could communicate between hosts was terrifying. It wasn't just a virus. It was becoming a network, an organism with a single purpose, to consume everything. One night, as I reviewed security footage, I saw something that chilled me to my core. A group of infected stood motionless in the courtyard, their heads tilted upward, as if listening for something. Then, as if responding to an unseen command, they moved as one, converging on a single point in the outer wall. They clawed and pounded at the steel until it buckled. They knew exactly where to strike. I tried to warn the others, but my voice trembled with exhaustion and fear. "They're not mindless," I said, the words sticking in my throat. "They're adapting." But there was nothing we could do. Reinforcing the walls was impossible. Every attempt to build stronger defenses drained what little energy we had left, and the infected always found another weak spot. When I decided to record my message to survivors, it wasn't out of hope. It was out of necessity. I knew the lab wouldn't hold. The data, the formula, the serum was more important than any of us. If someone out there could hear my voice, they might stand a chance. I sat alone in the dimly lit control room, the recorder in front of me. My fingers hovered over the button, trembling slightly. What could I say? That would matter. How could I explain everything we had done, everything we had failed to do? Finally, I pressed the button and began to speak. My name is Dr. Elise Carter, I said, my voice shaking. I was part of Project Genesis. If you're hearing this, it means there's still a chance. We created the Haven strain. What you know as the infection. It was meant to save lives. Instead, it destroyed them. We thought we could control it, but we were wrong. I paused, swallowing hard. The words felt heavy, like stones in my throat. The cure exists. It's not complete, but it's real. The data is stored in this lab. The formula is here. If you can retrieve it, you might be able to finish what we started. You might be able to save what's left of humanity. The recorder blinked, signaling that it was still recording. I kept going, my voice steadying as I spoke. I won't lie to you. It won't be easy. The lab is overrun. The infected are everywhere, and they're, smarter than we thought. They'll stop at nothing to destroy what's here. But if you're brave enough, if you're strong enough, you can do this. As I spoke, the weight of my words sank in. I wasn't just pleading for help. I was passing the torch. If someone out there could hear me, they would carry the hope of humanity forward. And if no one could, well, at least I tried. The hardest part of recording the message wasn't the plea. It was the memories. As I spoke, my mind drifted to the people I had loved and lost. My family, my friends, my colleagues. I thought of my mother's laughter, a sound I hadn't heard in what felt like an eternity. She used to tell me stories when I was a child, tales of courage and resilience. I wondered what she would think of me now, trapped in this crumbling lab, clinging to hope in the face of overwhelming despair. Would she be proud, or would she mourn the choices that had led me here? I thought of my sister, Sarah. She had been my anchor, my best friend. She believed in me even when I doubted myself. I had promised her that my work would make the world a better place. That was before the outbreak, before the Haven strain turned the world into a nightmare. I didn't know if she was still alive. I didn't even know where to begin looking for her. The thought of her out there, alone in the darkness, tore at my heart. And then there were my colleagues, the people who had become my second family within these walls. Each one had given everything for this mission. Each one had faced the infected with courage and determination, and each one was now gone. Their faces haunted me, their voices echoing in my mind. I carried their memory with me, a weight I could never put down. Despite everything, I still believed in humanity. We had made terrible mistakes, unleashed horrors we couldn't control. But we had also achieved incredible things. The cure was proof of that, a testament to what we could accomplish when we refused to give up. The cure isn't just a formula, I said into the recorder. It's a symbol of what we're capable of. It's a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we can find a way to fight back. Humanity has faced extinction before, and we've always survived. This time will be no different. I thought of the survivors out there, clinging to life in a world that had turned against them. They were the reason I kept going, the reason I hadn't given up. They were proof that humanity wasn't finished yet. As long as they fought, as long as they hoped there was still a chance. The alarms grew louder, their shrill cries cutting through the stillness. The infected were closing in, their growls echoing through the halls. The steel walls trembled under their relentless assault, and I knew the end was near. I finished the recording with a final plea. If you're hearing this, don't give up. Humanity's survival depends on you. Find the lab. Retrieve the data. Finish the cure. You are our last hope. As the recorder blinked, signaling the message had been saved, I felt a strange sense of calm. The clock was still ticking. The infected were still coming. But for the first time, I felt hope. Not for myself. I knew my time was running out. But for the world. For the people I loved. For the chance to undo what we had done. The lab had become a war zone. What little light remained flickered against the cracked walls, casting long, shifting shadows that seemed to move on their own. The infected were inside. Their growls reverberated through the halls, a constant, oppressive sound that seemed to press against my chest. The steel doors groaned as they buckled under their relentless assault, each strike a reminder of how little time was left. I clutched the recorder in one hand and the case containing the serum in the other. The broadcast wasn't finished yet. I couldn't leave, not until the message was complete. I couldn't let this be the end. Not yet. The first breach came from the west corridor. A section of the containment wall collapsed under the weight of the infected, their bodies piling against the steel until it gave way. They flooded into the lab, their movements erratic, yet terrifyingly coordinated. Their growls were deafening now, blending with the sound of alarms and the sputtering hum of failing machinery. I watched on the security monitor as the infected surged forward, tearing through what remained of the lab's defenses. My colleagues had fought to hold them back, but now there was no one left. It was just me, the data, and the serum. My heart pounded as I bolted the door to the control room, knowing it wouldn't hold for long. The broadcast had to be finished. It was the only way to ensure that someone, somewhere, could carry on the work we had started. My hands trembled as I pressed the record button, the weight of the moment crashing down on me. This is Dr. Elise Carter, broadcasting from the remains of Project Genesis. If you're hearing this, you are humanity's last hope. I paused, taking a shaky breath, as the sounds of the infected grew louder. The lab is overrun. The infected are inside. I don't have much time, but you need to listen carefully. The cure exists. It's incomplete, but it's real. The data, the serum, it's all here. It's the key to saving what's left of humanity. The walls shook as another section of the lab gave way. I could feel the vibrations through the floor, a chilling reminder of how little time I had left. My voice cracked as I continued, the urgency spilling out of me like a flood. The lab is located in Sector 7B, just beyond the quarantine zone. The coordinates are embedded in this broadcast. If you can reach it, if you can retrieve the data, you might be able to finish what we started, but you need to hurry. The infected won't stop. They'll destroy everything if they can. I clenched the recorder tightly, my mind racing as I tried to condense everything into a few short sentences. What could I say that would make someone take the risk? What could I say to make them believe it was worth it? My name is Dr. Elise Carter, I said, my voice trembling. I know you don't know me, and I don't know you, but I'm asking you, begging you to finish what we couldn't. The Haven strain destroyed everything we loved, but the cure can bring it back. It can save the people you love, the ones you've lost. I paused, choking back the lump in my throat. Memories of my family, my friends, my colleagues flashed through my mind. Their faces were clear, vivid, as if they were standing right in front of me. I had a sister, Sarah, I continued. She believed in me, in this work. I don't know if she's still out there, but if she is, I'm doing this for her. And for everyone else who still has a chance. The infected were closer now. I could hear their footsteps, their guttural growls just beyond the door. My heart pounded as I pressed on, the words tumbling out of me in a desperate rush. "Please," I said, "don't let this be the end. Humanity has come back from the brink before, and we can do it again. But it starts with you. It starts with this. Find the lab, retrieve the data, finish the cure. You're the only hope we have left." The door buckled under the weight of the infected, the steel bending inward with each impact. My hands trembled as I saved the broadcast and uploaded the coordinates, my mind racing with every second that passed. The recorder blinked, signaling that the transmission was complete. It was done. The door finally gave way, the sound of tearing metal ringing in my ears. The infected poured into the control room, their eyes glinting with an unnatural hunger. I backed away, clutching the case of serum to my chest. My breath hitched as I realized there was nowhere left to run, but I couldn't let them destroy the data. I couldn't let them destroy the cure. I scrambled toward the console, my fingers flying over the keys, as I initiated the data transfer. If I could send it to the satellite uplink, it might survive, even if the lab didn't. The infected closed in, their growls growing louder, their claws scraping against the floor as they advanced. "This is Dr. Elise Carter," I said, my voice steady despite the fear that gripped me. "If you're hearing this, you're our last hope. Humanity's survival depends on you. Don't let this be the end." The infected lunged, their claws slicing through the air as I hit the final key. The console beeped, the uplink engaged. The data was sent, the serum was secure, and then the world erupted into chaos. The last thing I saw was the recorder blinking, the red light flickering as the infected swarmed around me. The last thing I felt was the weight of the serum case slipping from my hands. And the last thing I heard was the sound of my own voice, echoing through the control room, carrying a message of hope into the void. The broadcast cut off abruptly, replaced by static. The message was out there now, a beacon of hope. In a world consumed by darkness, whether it would reach someone, whether they would answer the call, was a question I would never know the answer to. But I had done my part. The rest was up to them. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it so more people can experience it too. And if you have any suggestions or feedback, don't hesitate to drop a comment below. We'd love to hear from you. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because your support is what drives us to create more amazing content. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video.